Here we are. It's live with Dr. J. Mitchell Perry.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Friday. I like Fridays. I presume you do too, because it feels different over the weekend. It's an opportunity to decompress, to review how life is going. You can spend even closer time with people that matter. You can get stuff done. It's all kinds of things about the weekend, which makes people exhale and decompress. Today's subject, by the way, I have to tell you, this was pretty exciting. Last Tuesday, we did question and answer with Dr. Perry, and we had, as of right now, we had something like 443 people reached. Mike, how about that? That was in excess of the previous Friday. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, more people are tuning in. I think your consistency of doing it regularly, people are looking forward to it. It's great.
Yeah, I'm really having a blast, and I really thank everybody for your interest and participation. As I go through the material today, please know this subject matter today is called It's All About Your Character. It's always about your character. And so we'll be talking about strength of character and how do you build it and how do you calibrate it and what do you do about it and how do you teach it to your children. So there's a lot of material here. And having said that, you may decide that you would like to either take some notes or you may decide you want to get the article that I have written on this very subject. And if you do, then go to our website, jmperry.com, and request that. And we'll send that to you with our compliments. On the other hand, you may want a longer version. I've also recorded a longer version of this called Its Strength of Character. And if you like that, you can go to our website and you can get that one. And that's a purchase, of course. So now to start Strength of Character, let me see if I can walk you through this material. This, by the way, has been on my mind for my whole career. I have been concerned about people and their strength of character, how their character determines their outcomes, which means if you have really good character, life is going to be generally much better. If you have really poor character, life is generally going to be much worse. Poor character is going to cost you more relationships and cost you more money. And sometimes cost you your freedom. Strong character is going to help you have a much greater series of financial and relationship success. And yet most people rarely actually think about the strength of their own character, and they rarely think about how they may want to develop it. So I've been working on this for a long time. I have written a lot of material on it. There's a series of recordings on the very same subject. And I've worked on my own character for the last 30, 40 years. And I can tell you, life is really good when you look in the mirror and you feel pretty good about what you see. So let's first start with a story I'd like to tell you that I had a wonderful memory with my mentor. And in 1995, he died. He was a wonderful man. He died at age 100. And he taught me a lot for many years previously. And I was so tickled to find out from his widow that he was really deteriorating in 1995. He got a copy of one of my books. I dedicated the book to him, and she told me that he smiled and then he died. Wonderful man, a man named George Smanis, who taught me a lot about standards, follow through, character, success, all that stuff. He was worldwide known and very, very wonderful man. And in one of my conversations where I was sitting next to the sensei, in one of my conversations, he said, "It looks to me like you would like to be very successful. Is that right?" And I said, "Yes, that's right." And he said, "I suppose, Dr. Perry, that you also want to be very successful and keep your character strong. Is that right?" And I said, "Yes, that's right." And he said, "I've never seen anybody do it." And I said, "Say that again." He said, "I've worked with some enormously successful people, And my experience is if they're enormously successful, they will have to compromise their character somewhere along the way. And I said to him in 1995, I said to him, well, that's not going to happen to me. And he chuckled. And I've remembered that to this day. And what I have noticed is my success that I've enjoyed over many years ever been to the level that I wanted? And the answer is no. On the other hand, I've been enormously appreciative of all the success I've had. And yet I also noticed that there were times over many years where I had to make some key decisions. And for me to be enormously successful, I would have to compromise my self-respect. And I refused to do that. So what's interesting is George told me something. He'd never seen anybody be enormously successful without compromising their character. And I imagine there's some people that can keep their character real strong. On the other hand, I noticed that over my lifetime, if I wanted to keep my character strong, which I have, then I noticed that I really would have to do the right thing on a regular basis. And having to do the right thing on a regular basis meant that cutting corners, being slightly deceitful, trying to hide something, operating from lower standards would be unacceptable. Therefore, while I've really enjoyed great success, I think George was right. In order to be obscenely successful, then what's important is that what you have to do is you have to keep doing the right thing. And a lot of people will say to me, well, but Dr. Perry, you don't always know what the right thing is to do. And the answer is that's correct. You don't. However, most of the time you do know what the right thing is to do. And one of the ways to help you make those decisions is just simply say, if I do this, does my self-respect go up? If the answer is yes, then it's the right thing to do. On the other hand, if you say, if I do that and my self-respect goes down, however I may want to do that, then it's a bad decision. It's pretty simple, just to sort of check your self-respect with respect to your decisions and initiatives and all those kinds of things. And so therefore, let's talk about what is your character and how does it work? Well, your character is made up of your basic governing values, your standards of conduct, your rules of engagement, your priorities in life, and especially your self-respect. So let me check something out with you. Do you notice that every morning you wake up you? Well, if you know that you always wake up you, even if in the middle of the night you're having a dream where you are imagining you're somebody else, do you ever notice then you wake up and there you are? I always say, wherever you go, there you are, so there you go. So if you know that every morning you wake up you, then you can be highly confident that as long as you're alive, the only person who's always going to be there is the person in the mirror. Translated, you are always going to attend that party. So therefore, if you're always going to attend that party every time you wake up, then does it make any sense at all to treat that person in the mirror with indifference or contempt or some form of disrespect? Or do you really want to wake up in the morning looking in the mirror, feeling unimpressed with what you see? So here's some questions you want to ask yourself. Every time you wake up in the morning, think about these questions. Are you pleased or embarrassed? Are you proud or are you ashamed? Are you impressed or are you depressed? How about, are you excited or are you bored? Are you energetic or listless? Are you engaged or isolated? Are you powerful or weak? Or do you feel meaningful or meaningless? Those are pretty powerful questions you want to ask yourself. And what's interesting is often you will ask yourself those questions maybe consciously. And when you do ask yourself those questions, you may notice that too often the bad outcome or the bad feeling tends to take center stage. Therefore, my recommendation is for you to say to yourself, if you always have to live with yourself, your feelings, your choices, your behavior, then because life is very short, what are your thoughts about really operating from high strength of character? Because your kids will follow your role modeling. Your friends will gravitate to a person of higher character if they want that as well. And you'll notice that you'll lead a by far more meaningful life where you're contributing more than you're whining. So therefore, let's take a look at what is the basic ingredients of character in the first place. Keep in mind, as you are listening and watching today, if you have a comment or if you have a question, then all you got to do is write out the comment or the question live right now, and Mike, our producer, will put it up there. Is that right, Mike? Are you there?
Yeah, we've got a few comments coming in, Dr. Perry.
Excellent. Okay.
So definitely nice to see those. We'll put them up as they come in and toward the end of the show.
Very good. All right. So now let's talk about the condition of your character. Or how about the condition of what strength of character is about in the first place? The ingredients of strong character, I figured out with some of my colleagues probably 25 years ago. And the ingredients that I think best describe what strong character is about, there are three of them. If you got a pen, write this down. There are three basic ingredients of strong character, which I think are easy to remember. I also think that they require your constant monitoring to see how well you are doing in any or all of the three. The first one is integrity. A person who operates from strong character is a person who puts a premium on integrity. That means they would much rather tell the truth than lie or tap dance or tell little white lies or be deceitful or whatever. Does that mean you have to tell the truth all the time? Sometimes people think that having to tell the truth justifies them being disrespectful. Sometimes you'll run into people who really are nasty, critical, hard-edged, mean, that kind of thing. And if you ever call somebody who behaves that way mean, gee, you're critical, gee, you're hard to be around, gee, you're hard on people, you'll get them saying in return sometimes, well, hey, I got to tell the truth. Do you want me to lie? I don't think you want me to lie. Mike, you have known people like that, nasty people who will justify that nastiness by saying they're telling the truth. And my thoughts are, you can certainly tell the truth. It really comes down to how much are you willing to be candid without being hurtful? How much are you willing to tell the truth without being nasty at the same time? And Mike, you've encountered people like that in your lifetime. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then they get defensive when you call them on their behavior because they say, well, I have to tell the truth. You don't want me to lie. And the reality is, I want to be nasty. That's what they really want to do, but they'll be defensive, calling it telling the truth. So it's entirely possible that you can package the truth without being nasty. It's entirely possible you can package the truth without being nasty. And my experience is that the people that I've experienced over a long period of time who really have strong character are quite good at being candid without being nasty. So therefore, I really respect those people who are candid without being nasty. And I also notice there's a lot of people out there that lie a lot. Now, some people say, well, I don't really lie. I just don't say the truth, meaning I withhold the information. That's your call about how much you want to illuminate the truth about something. But my experience is people of strong character are willing to take the heat if they have to tell the truth, and sometimes that's a risk. On the other hand, you got to keep looking in the mirror about what you see, and if you tell the truth on a regular basis, does your self-respect go up? And the answer is yes, it does. Lying on a regular basis just really compromises both your conduct and people of quality wanting to affiliate with you. So the first one is called being honest, integrity, operating from integrity, instead of lying, tap dancing, pretending, spinning, stalling, distracting, rationalizing, justifying, and avoiding. What's interesting is I notice a lot of people in government are pretty good at lying. And that really disturbs me because we pay them and they got the gig. And it appears as if their need to keep their job is bigger than their need to tell the truth. And therefore, it appears that a lot of people in government would much prefer to accuse somebody else rather than operate from more integrity. That seems to be now very popular, regardless of whatever party you're in. And it seems to be broadcast on television on a regular basis, around which we, as citizens and voters, become very dismayed at what appears to be a very little degree of integrity. So number one is integrity. Number two is responsibility. Number two indicator or ingredient of strength of character is responsibility. Well, you've heard me say this if you've been listening to me on live, and that is this: if life is going well for you, you largely did that. If life stinks, you certainly largely did that too. And if life is a whole new level of underwhelming and beige and boring, you probably did that too. So your life as an adult is completely your responsibility. Your feelings, your decisions, your initiatives, your conduct, your behavior, the way you operate is your responsibility. And what's interesting is there's still a huge population of people in this country and around the world who somehow think that it's always somebody else's fault, that it's the responsibility of someone else. There's a huge population of people that want to look at what's wrong with them and then say they ought to take responsibility. And my thoughts are, I wonder how much you take responsibility. Now, responsibility is the single biggest indicator of being a fully functioning grown-up. If you want to be an adult, then it's important that you take responsibility for yourself. And as you know, there's a percentage of people that are rewarded for being irresponsible and always blaming somebody else and wanting some compensation from somebody else rather than taking responsibility themselves. So what's interesting about that is highly responsible people tend to own their behavior. If your children always want to blame somebody else, and they rarely, if ever, own their own behavior, and they grow up into adults and they're still doing that, then it's entirely possible you, as a parent, have helped them behave that way. They imprinted and they learned their method of behavior from you. So if you are concerned about your kids continually being irresponsible as grown-ups, then how did they learn that? It's entirely possible some or much of it was modeled by you as a parent. So my recommendation is you got three choices. First is you can be profoundly irresponsible because it's always somebody else's fault and it's always their responsibility to fix it. And you've been mistreated while you have been let down, or you have been dependent, and they are always mistreating you in your view, if you are continually irresponsible. Financially is your responsibility. So if financially you're doing pretty well, you've been taking responsibility for your financial condition. If financially you fail to save money and you are whining about being older in life and you have very little money, well, you did that. So at the end of the day, if you want to be continually irresponsible and whining and blaming somebody else, then that's something you get to do. So that's the first kind of people who are irresponsible. The next type of people, very relatively small population, these are people who take too much responsibility. Too much responsibility are people who take responsibility for themselves and they take responsibility for everybody else as well. Which means people who take responsibility for everybody else as well are called enablers. Let me enable you, my son, or you, my uncle, or you, my in my network. Let me enable by rescuing you to relieve you of being responsible for yourself. So people who take too much responsibility are responsible for themselves and feel this need to somehow take care of everybody else. And then, of course, that enables them to be highly dependent and critical of you. So if you're one of those people, then you've been routinely taking too much responsibility for everybody else and therefore enabling them to be irresponsible. Then the third group is the one, of course, I encourage you to consider. And that is take responsibility for you, your choices, your initiative, your behavior, and then let them, whoever they are, handle their lives the way they're going to handle them. Because you notice, if you've ever tried to fix anybody unsolicited, you'll notice that unsolicited psychotherapy is called abuse. And so if you try to fix people, you'll notice that's uphill. And you're always trying to rescue somebody that is disinterested in being rescued. So try to take responsibility for your behavior, your initiatives, your emotions, your conduct. And the more you take responsibility, life is going to be by far better for you in so many dimensions. So that's number 2 ingredient for strong character. And the third one is what I call generosity of spirit. Generosity of spirit is the part of character that says you are good at forgiveness. You are good at giving more than taking. You are good at contributing more than consuming. You're good at being caring more than expecting and criticizing. You're good at investing rather than expensing. The generosity of spirit essentially is where you've got grace, you've got care, you've got extra mile. You're the model for this kind of behavior that suggests that you would rather be somebody you like and show some form of reinforcement to others than condemning everybody all the time. And that takes practice. And you may notice, for example, if you think about integrity, responsibility, and generosity of spirit, you may notice that you're high on integrity and high on responsibility, and you need a little more work on the generosity of spirit. Or the other way around, you may be high on generosity of spirit because you're about relationships and being kind. On the other hand, you're low on responsibility because you're always letting somebody else take care of you. So you could be high in one and low on the other, or medium. And the more you think about integrity, responsibility, and generosity of spirit, and you start thinking about, okay, what's the condition from your view about all three? You may notice that you can feel pretty good about one or two, and you may want to start working on another. And when you start thinking about that, how do you balance those three components? Then invariably you're spending more time thinking about how you're going to conduct yourself, where your self-respect generally goes up most all the time. So, Mike, as you're thinking about the strength of character and you're thinking about integrity, responsibility, generosity of spirit, what's getting your attention right about now?
I love everything you're saying. And as you talk about enabler, I think that resonates well with me in terms of where and how I do that. And I'm not always sure where to go to minimize doing that because I fall into that personally. And it's interesting. I like what you say.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I used to do that myself. I used to take responsibility for me, and then I used to take responsibility for other people, which enabled them to continue to be irresponsible. Some parents have done that pretty darn well for their baby boomer, or for their millennial children. If you call the teacher to change the grade for your little boy, or you call the dean at the university to change the grade for your little girl, if you sit in on hiring interviews so you can protect your little children from the possibility of failing to get the job, I mean, if you're continually taking responsibility for the conduct of your children, when at the end of the day, they got to take responsibility for themselves, then you're enabling them to remain weak and whiny and dependent. And that's what a whole bunch of parents have done as a disservice unintentionally to their own children. They love their children, they want to protect their children, and yet they protected them too much. Does that sound familiar, Mike?
Yeah, it does. And I really like this whole topic. You know, it's all about character. And with character, you have these three items: integrity, responsibility, and generosity of spirit.
Yes.
It's wonderful information you've put together.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So let's continue on here. Now, if we're going to talk about it's always about your character. Now, you may be saying, okay, you told us what's going on. You told us what the ingredients are. How do I improve my own character, Dr. Perry? Or how do I improve the character or teach strength of character to my own children? Because I can tell you the way you operate is often, most all the time, a reflection of your character. And you may say, well, how did I get my character? Well, there's probably three ways in which you got it. unconsciously. One is you adopted some standards of your own family, the way they behaved, their standards of their own conduct somehow automatically got infused into your brain. So if your parents, for example, thought lying and being deceitful was a good idea, you probably did that. And if your parents taught you that little white lies were okay, then you probably decided that. If your parents cheated and lied and stole a lot, you probably thought that was okay. On the other hand, your parents operated from very high standards and took a lot of responsibility and taught you that. You probably got it from them. So first place you got your standards were just through osmosis from your parents. Next place you got some standards is your parents were hugely a disappointment to you. You were embarrassed, you were disgusted, you were angry, you felt mistreated, denied something. And it's entirely possible you decided that what you wanted to do is be a much better person than your parents. And so a life mission for you was to really reject a lot of what you got from your family of origin, and you wanted to be quite different. That's another place. And then the third one is there may have been people in society, either close to you or far away from you. You knew something about them and you decided to operate your life modeling some of their behavior. Sometimes that's really bad. For example, if you grow up in a horrible environment and you decided that joining a street gang was the way you were going to survive, then you operated deliberately with that choice because you justified it by saying, well, this is the way I'm going to behave because I'm safe this way. On the other hand, if you look at what you did during a street gang, you'll notice that that was pretty horrible stuff for which you probably paid a high price. So you can get character from several sources, and my recommendation is to consider any or all of the following, because now if you were to strengthen your character, or if you were to put a high premium, what might you do differently? More of or less of, and I'm going to talk a lot about more of. This could be something you could teach your children, and this could be something you could practice for yourself as well. First thing I encourage you to do if you have children is do something I did with a patient of mine years ago. He was a father, and he was trying to improve his own standards. And he had his wife, and he had a couple of kids, and they were in elementary school. And I said, well, how about you go home, sir, and how about you get together with your children and your wife and have a conference over a period of time with them to decide what the family values are. And he said, I've never done that. And I said, well, how about you and your family come up with what you consider to be the foundational values of your family. He said, okay, good idea. So he did. He took a few weeks and he got together with them over the dinner table, and they decided what the family values were. And then they all wrote them down. They made it real pretty, put it in a frame and put it on the dining room wall. So what was interesting is that he really was surprised and pleased that when everybody decided what the family values were, and they came up, I think, with 5 values they put a premium on. When everybody decided what they were, then the kids held the father and the mother accountable when they were failing to operate from family values. And the one that I really remember, and I loved it, they used the term oak tree. Oak tree. The kids liked the term oak tree. It was one of their 5 family values. And what was really cool is oak tree meant we were going to be strong, we're going to be sturdy, and we're going to stay together, because that's the image of an oak tree. So whenever people started behaving badly and deciding, I don't like you anymore, and I don't want to play with you anymore, or mom and dad started arguing with each other, then the kids would say, mom, dad, oak tree. And it really affected the father. He said, I got to tell you, I love that. They're holding me accountable too. So my recommendation with your kids, if you want to create some strong values, is get together with your kids and your spouse or whoever's at home. And I'd like you to come together with what you might consider to be the sacrosanct, we will commit and stick with it series of values. And that essentially illuminates the obvious. Here's some additional things. my mother really taught me a lot about some standards of conduct, one of which she taught me, and my siblings, she taught me discipline. And though I'm less than thrilled about exactly how she did it, because my guess is my mother wanted to be a master gunnery sergeant, and so as a result, she was barking orders all the time. On the other hand, she did teach me discipline and a variety of other values, for which I will always be appreciative. One thing she taught me about discipline is discipline simply means you go do whatever it is you've agreed to do, even when you're disinterested in doing it. For example, some of you think regular exercise is important. Some of you are going to start exercising real soon. So you may decide, I really want to be disciplined about regular exercise, which means some days I really am disinterested in doing it. On the other hand, I'm going to do it anyway. So what's interesting is highly disciplined people get more done, which means you ever notice if you want help to get something done, it's a good idea to talk to a person who's really disciplined and busy, because a disciplined and busy person will make the time to get it done with you. Interesting, you go to a person who has lots of time on their hands, you'll notice rarely will you get them to do anything because they're completely undisciplined. So discipline is deciding to pay the freight and do whatever you need to do, even on those occasions when you're disinterested in doing it. That really creates a wonderful series of outcomes when you're highly disciplined. Next, teach your kids to own their behavior. If they screwed it up, or if they messed it up, or if they lied, or they cheated, or they deceived you, or something, they have to own it. And own it means, rather than saying, it's not my fault, it's their fault, and I don't see why you're treating me this way when they're doing what they're doing. That's hugely popular in this country right now, pulling out your finger and pointing it at somebody else. Well, the more you own your behavior, the more you're going to operate from stronger character. Everybody screws up. Everybody has to own it. And there's a huge population of people who always want to make it somebody else's fault. So if you can teach your kids to own their behavior, that would be really good. You own your own as well. How about change your conduct first? What's interesting about strong character is people who have strong character almost always look in the mirror first. What that means is rather than trying to change their behavior, you change your own behavior. What's interesting is when you change your own behavior, whoever they are now have to behave differently. If you allow someone to abuse you over a period of time and you keep allowing it, that encourages that person to treat you badly. If, on the other hand, you decide to change your behavior and now you start fighting back, well, all you know for sure is you're going to have more heat, more fighting. On the other hand, if you refuse to allow them to abuse you and you just stand fast, or you say some form of, please go abuse somebody else, I'm done. What's interesting is that person who's abusing is now saying, gee, I'm unable to abuse this person any longer. So if you change your behavior first, what's interesting is whoever they are, have to change theirs, and you're going to have a much better outcome than trying to get them to change their behavior. Here's another one. Thank you notes. Thank you notes. My mom taught me thank you notes, and I've been writing thousands of them over my lifetime. I had to learn how to write thank you notes when I was in elementary school, and I hated doing it. So I remember I had to write thank you notes, for example, to my godparents. Thank you, Dr. and Mrs. Knight, for the book. I really like it. I got to go now. Bye. And I remember thinking, I'm in fourth or fifth grade, and I remember thinking, when I grow up, I'm never going to write thank you notes. Well, I write them all the time. What's interesting about thank you notes is how often I talk to younger people today, and they will say to me, hey, Dr. Perry, nobody writes thank you notes anymore, at which point I say precisely why it's so important to write them, because that suggests you have enough grace and suggests you have enough character to acknowledge somebody for what they did for you. Thank you notes, handwritten in the mail with a stamp on them. And as much as that may be insane, most everybody who gets a thank you note loves it. and they save the thank you note. So please do that. Another one, show more gratitude and show more reinforcement. If you've listened to live, then you know that I'm a firm believer there has to be a lot more reinforcement than there has to be criticism. People are really good at criticizing others. It's a huge time waster, and we can all get caught up in it. On the other hand, if you spend more time reinforcing others, admiring them, appreciating them, telling them what you really like about them, giving them a parade in their honor, the more you do that, the stronger character you have, simply because you're more reinforcing than criticizing. You're building it up rather than tearing it down. And so my recommendation is show gratitude and reinforcement. Sounds pretty simple, sounds pretty commonsensical. Just very few people ever do it. Next, this one's very important. And I've been doing this one my whole life. Send condolence notes when somebody dies and you hear about it and you know that person who died, or you know the person who is the relative of somebody who died. Send them a condolence letter. I've lost count of all the condolence letters I've sent over many years. And as I get older and I'm in my, I'll call it my distinguished period. Yeah, that's it. As I get older, I notice I'm writing more and more condolence letters. People really get their life touched when you send them a letter of condolences. And a lot of times you have very little expertise, or you may have some insecurity about what would you say. Well, just talk from your heart. And after a period of time, you send a condolence letter. I'm struck with how many times people will send me a letter, or they'll send me an email thanking me for a condolence letter. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's very gracious. On the other hand, I think it's unnecessary to thank me for a condolence letter. The fact that they are thanking me tells me that the condolence letter touched their lives. So if you want to show more character, does your self-respect go up if you send people a condolence letter? Next, pay the freight. Go the distance. Pay the freight and go the distance. That simply means if you got to do something, go do it. If you got to clean it up, go clean it up. If you are going to learn how to run a marathon, then start paying the freight and go in the distance. If you need to pay somebody back, pay them back, rather than just avoiding your debt in the first place. That sounds pretty simple. Pay the freight, go the distance. Some people do that. Some people have real trouble doing that. The next one is, with whom do you want to affiliate? With whom do you want to affiliate? You will have friends in your lifetime. Some friends will be there for a long time. Some friends, because you're getting better, or you're getting more successful, or you've raised your educational level, or you're operating from a higher quality, you will notice that some friends will either evaporate because they feel uncomfortable because you're doing too well and they're doing too poorly, or you also may decide you got to trade in some of these friends. And the reason why you have to trade in some of these friends is because they operate from poor character. And every time you have to put up with their behavior, you decide, yeah, I think the friendship is over. So as I've over many years been working on my own character and feeling better and stronger and more effective in my strength of character, there has been some people in my lifetime where I just finally said, I'm done. And the reason I said that is because they wanted to operate from lower character, and it cost me angst, or it cost me money, or it cost me my self-respect that I was participating in some kind of a friendship that really was now an expense rather than an investment. So over many years, if you keep on deciding, okay, with whom do I want to affiliate? And you say, I want to affiliate with those people because I really respect them. Then what ends up happening is they want to affiliate with you for the same reason. Water does, in fact, seek its own level. So therefore, if you think about, all right, think about good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods. Generally, good neighborhoods are more expensive. They're generally safer. They generally have a population of people who pay more freight in taking care of their property. That's why they're good neighborhoods. Well, most people who operate from strength of character want to live in better neighborhoods because they can and because it's safer, better with higher quality people. Bad neighborhoods are ones that are unsafe and they're generally populated by a lot of people who operate from lower standards. That's sort of obvious. So you have to decide, do you want to hang on to a friendship just because you've been friends for so long, where many decades later, by now, you have so little in common because of the way they operate is of less character than the way you operate. So if you are staying in horrible places with horrible people, then my guess is that they are the best you think you can do. And that's up to you. On the other hand, remember, if life is going great, you did that. And if life stinks, you did that too. So, my recommendation is when I think about all of this, consider what's the right thing. Most of the time, you know what the right thing is to do. Most of the time, you really have to decide to what extent do you want to do the right thing. For example, donate your stuff or donate some money. You have stuff that could be easily be given to people who need it. And right now it's collecting dust. So donate your stuff. Some of the stuff that you don't want anymore, take it down to the Salvation Army or whatever and give it away. Makes you feel good that you did that. And it makes whoever gets to use it happy that you donated it. So if you donate your stuff, does your self-respect go up? And the answer is, yeah, probably does. Or meet your neighbors, and some of your neighbors are neighbors you really like. Well, affiliate with your neighbors. Go introduce yourself. What's interesting is people used to almost always knew their neighbors. One of the things that changed a whole bunch of how people behave in neighborhoods is air conditioning. When you have air conditioning, the likelihood you're going to sit out on the front porch is a lot less. Curious about how that works. So if you've been meaning for a long time to go meet your neighbors, go meet them. Show a little strength of character, a little generosity of spirit. Give them freshly baked bread and see if a relationship could develop. That really is a nice thing to do. And does that always work? No. Some neighbors really do want to have you enjoy their unhappiness. You've known people like that. So affiliate with people and donate your time or donate your stuff. That's always good. Finally, what I would like to say to you is essentially the following. You get more than you give when you give more than you get. Let me do that again. You get more than you give when you give more than you get. And so therefore, if the lion's share of what you do is continually making an effort to close down that gap between what you espouse and what you practice, there's always going to be a gap. Some people, some politicians you're really unimpressed with, espouse this stuff and they behave this way. So it sounds good, but the gap is huge. Some people generally espouse this and the gap is reasonably small. There's always going to be a gap. So therefore, you got to think about, you get more than you give when you give more than you get. The more you give, the more you care, the more you go the extra mile, the more you pay the freight, the more you operate from integrity, responsibility, and generosity of spirit. Generally, you feel better about what you see in the mirror. And then when you do that, then a lot of people respect you, which has a longer shelf life if they just find you popular. So what I would say to you is as follows, and before I do my final remarks, Mike, what in particular got your attention today?
I love this topic, Dr. Perry, because it applies to everybody. The idea of having higher strength of character and focusing on the areas that make the needle move on that is really key.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And sometimes people say, well, you got to be careful about karma. And while I'm unable to quantify exactly what karma is, it does seem that people who operate from pretty poor character, it seems sometimes they're getting away with murder. On the other hand, let enough time go by and karma, meaning what goes around comes around, seems to you just wait long enough for people who have bad character, and they generally suffer bad outcomes over the lifetime. And so my recommendation is you got a huge responsibility as adults to show some standards of character to both your family, your children, and your friends, and your society. Contributing to society is something extraordinarily important because life goes by extraordinarily quickly. If you live now and you look in the mirror and you feel pretty good about what you see, then good for you. Congratulations. If you look in the mirror and there's some dimensions of your life where you're sad, you feel stupid, you betrayed some of your own trust, you've betrayed the trust of other people, then it's time for you to work on improving your own character. Because every morning you wake up, even if you try to be somebody else, wherever you go, there you are. So there you go. So it's always about your character. And finally, what I would say to you is as follows. Good character is a choice. Good character is your choice. You get to decide at what level you would like to live your standards. You can take the low road. I know a bunch of people who do that. Or you can take the high road, which is sometimes a little difficult. On the other hand, the payoff of taking the high road means you get to feel pretty good about what you see in the mirror, and that's a much better way of living your life than somehow tap dancing, rationalizing, justifying, blaming, criticizing, and generally feeling bad about what you see in the mirror. Therefore, in conclusion, what I would say to you, thank you very much for your time and attention. We're going to be doing live again next Tuesday, and I'm keen to know your thoughts and your questions about today's material. And remember, it's always about your character. It's a great pleasure to do this for you today. I hope you found value. Have a wonderful weekend. It's Memorial Day weekend, and make sure you reach out to people you care about, particularly the families of those we've lost, and show them some love, some care, some regard. It's really important. Thank you very much. See you next time.